Yo, what's going on? And welcome back to D+Pad Life. And today I want to talk about Resident Evil Zero. It says Origins Collection. Yeah, Zero. If you don't know, I've been covering the entire Resident Evil series and these Resident Evil discussion videos. So far, we've discussed Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3 on the PS1, as well as Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3's remakes. So now we continue on with the series with Resident Evil Zero, and then we'll get to Resident Evil Code Veronica on the next one. So if you're into Resident Evil content and the Resident Evil games, be sure you hit subscribe because I got a lot more where this came from. We're going to be covering this series for the next month. Plenty of videos coming up about Resident Evil. So, Resident Evil Zero. Well, yeah, before I jump right into it, so what I've been doing is discussing the good and the bad of each game and kind of telling a story or two about my time with the game early on. And so Zero's an interesting case, right? Because when Zero came out, initially when it was announced, it was going to be an N64 title. And then eventually it got moved to the GameCube, which I do think was the right call. But dang, man, I've always wanted to try that N64 version. It sure does look cool. If you haven't laid your eyes on it, be sure you do a search on Google. Search up some screenshots for that. But yeah, Resident Evil Zero is an interesting entry in the series. I feel like it's pretty polarizing. I think most people are pretty dissatisfied by it, actually. They consider it one of the weaker entries, especially of the mainline games. And what I find intriguing about that is that, for me personally, between the remake and Zero, I think I prefer Zero. Now, I don't know if that's a hot take. I feel like it might be. I think for some, they might be shaking their head at me right now. Like, how can that even be possible? Remake is not only one of the best Resident Evil games ever made, it's one of the best games ever made, and not just to mention one of the best remakes ever made. So how can you prefer Zero? So bear with me on that. I discussed in the remake video my hangups with that game and the reason why it doesn't really top my favorite Resident Evil games. I admit it's great. I admit it's a fabulous game, but it has some issues. And primarily, it's the pacing. I'm not a fan of the slower, methodical movement and animation style they went with, which for the game, it fits. Like, I'm not taking away from that at all. I'm not saying I dislike it in the sense that it's bad. I'm saying it just it makes the game feel so slow for me and it just doesn't keep up a great pace. Now, granted, that same thing does exist in Zero, except it is sped up a little bit. A lot of the enemies are way faster in Zero, which speeds up the action and kind of keeps things cruising. You don't really get that you don't get that same aspect from Resident Evil Remake. But then it's not only that. In Resident Evil Remake, you got to do a lot of backtracking to burn zombies so they don't become Crimson Heads in a game that's full of backtracking. So to me, it just really extends that game and makes it feel like a little bit more of a slightly bloated experience. But when you come to Zero, they didn't do any of that. The Crimson Heads do not exist in this game. And in fact, I feel like the zombies go down much easier in this game than they do in the remake. I feel like they take less damage, less effort, so to speak. And so it really it keeps up this really great pace. Now that I'm saying that out loud, one thing that does come to mind though is since there's no item boxes in this game, the way they got around that was a brand new mechanic that only ever appeared in this game, which could go to show that it's not that great of a mechanic, but ultimately you can leave items anywhere you want. Now, that can lead to some heavy backtracking, and I will admit, Zero on your first or second run, it's rough, man. It's rough. It definitely takes some getting used to. It takes some learning of the game and what it expects of you. And honestly, just a general knowledge of what is going on with this game and what you need where and when. So for first timers through Zero, I definitely understand why it becomes frustrating for them and why it's not exactly their favorite game. But the thing about Zero that I have discovered is upon every revisit, every replay, I have more and more fun with this one. In fact, the backtracking for items generally doesn't start to bother me until the very end of the game, because by then I'm trying to get all my best stuff and take it with me to the final boss, and chances are I haven't just been dragging it along. Some of the rooms at the end of the game are really tough to get through. There's some really tough enemy formats in some of those rooms. But with that being said, I'm talking about my time with Resident Evil Zero, right? This is a discussion video about me. And so some of the things that are bad about this game, I have found that through multiple playthroughs kind of fade to the background. And what it really reveals is a really cool and fun and unique Resident Evil game. I mean, it's the only Resident Evil game in the classic style. I'm talking tank controls, pre-rendered backgrounds, and preset camera angles where you have co-op mode. So you can use your right joystick to control Billy as well, or Rebecca, whoever you're currently not playing as. And you can kind of maneuver them where you want them to be so that they can assist you in the fight. Not to mention, yeah, there's 2 characters to always take on the challenges up ahead, which I think is a really interesting and cool way. Now, one could argue, was it executed well? Did it play off well? Maybe not. Maybe you didn't feel that way. But that doesn't mean that it's bad. That just means it's different. Now, what I will say is it's certainly not for everyone. And that's okay. It doesn't have to be for everyone. But for me, I find Resident Evil Zero to just be an experience that I enjoy coming back to. Again, it's very unique. And it does do some stupid stuff. Like, the dude who's, like I said, these I said in another video, these aren't going to be very spoiler focused, right? So there's a guy who like sings and he's able to control a certain creature by singing. That's a little far-fetched. That's a little out there. That's abstract for Resident Evil. That's not really something common they do. But if you look at that footage right there, what they just did with that little heartbeat and the little flicker is they changed from controlling Billy to controlling Rebecca. Look at this. Rebecca's getting attacked and Billy can help her. Like, this co-op dynamic is really cool. I really appreciate it. Not to mention, are you seeing this? This game is gorgeous. I mean, absolutely gorgeous. Resident Evil Zero looks incredible. Now, again, Remake looks great too, but Zero is really fun because you go to all these unfamiliar locations. It's an absolutely new adventure in this remake style. And that was really exciting at the time. I mean, it's still exciting to me today. Just looking at this right now, I want to boot it up and play it. And out of the series so far, after all the games that I've covered, it's not like I wouldn't play those games if I booted them up, but I wasn't looking at any footage and being like, golly, I feel like playing that right now. Resident Evil Zero is special, man. And I certainly understand people's gripes with it, but what I would recommend is going back in and checking it out again, giving it another shot, especially if you still have some like remembrance of what you need to do and where things are. I find that this is one best played when you're familiar with it. It's really good. It really is really good. And it has such a large enemy variety and a fun arsenal of weapons and like multiple versions of certain guns, and the fact that you get to share your arsenal with a partner. It's really unique. It's really unique. I wish they would have revisited this style again and seen if they could have capitalized on it and where they could have gone from here. As far as Resident Evil Zero goes, I wouldn't say it like necessarily ranks as one of my favorite Resident Evils, but for me, it's my preferred 2 out of the 2 GameCube originals, Resident Evil Remake and Resident Evil Zero, both the ones you can find on the Origins collection. I would say if I had to choose between one to get stuck with, I'd probably choose the remake, but that's primarily just because it's the classic adventures with the classic characters I love. But when it comes to like deciding, I want to revisit one of the GameCube games, Zero is the one I find myself craving to play more. I just think it's the more fun of the 2. There's something about the remake that lands almost like a chore for me in a way. And I think it's just from the hyper familiarity with the original and then coming to this, and there's all these added rooms and all this added backtracking. And for me, it just kind of makes it turn into a bit of a slog. But then you play Zero and you get like fun unlockables like playing as Wesker and stuff like that. Like imagine playing as RE5 Wesker or Code Veronica Wesker, maybe is a better comparison, but in a classic Resident Evil game. Like, that's just really cool. So, if you haven't played Resident Evil 0 in a while, but you have played it before, I highly recommend checking it out and giving it another chance. I think you'd be surprised on how much better it feels with some familiarity. And if you're new to the franchise, like, yeah, I'll admit, Zero's kind of rough the first time through, but stick with it. Use a guide if you need to. And I think ultimately what you'll find is a very unique story and a very unique like scenario for these characters and very unique gameplay mechanics. You know, at the end of the day, for a series that has so many great entries, it was really fun to see them experiment with an old formula and see what they could get out of it. And ultimately, like, they experimented and maybe it wasn't the biggest success, but it certainly was unique and it certainly was fun in my opinion. I really love Zero. So as far as the bad goes for Resident Evil 0, I guess I would say like as much as there's a fun enemy variety, some of them are really tough. It is a really tough entry. I wouldn't necessarily say that's bad, but it can be discouraging and it can be intimidating. It can make going back to it a little rough because it's like, even if you like it like I do, knowing that there's just going to be so much challenge can be tough. But I don't know. Every time I've come back to it with the commitment of finishing it, I have been able to beat it. And so that shows that it's definitely conquerable. As far as other negatives, what I would say is I wasn't necessarily a fan of the mansion segment of the game. It kind of felt a little redundant considering there's a mansion in the first game. But what I will admit is, while it seems at face value that it's going to be a similar like layout and everything like that, it actually isn't. It certainly feels like its own place in time and like its own environment, so to speak. But there's just so many similarities in this idea of being in a spooky mansion. So personally, I actually would have preferred if they had done something different. Now, as far as the good goes, man, like that train section is so good, so nostalgic, so amazing. I mean, I think it's what we all really think about when we think of Resident Evil 0, and that section is super special. I also like everything after the mansion. I think you go and explore the chapel, and you go into like this, I don't even know what you would call it, but it's almost like a research area and almost like a smaller lab. And then you go into this chemical plant and just very unique sections, very unique settings. What I like though is, I guess I've already talked about that. As far as like stories of when I first got it, I do remember being super intrigued by the game and ultimately like finding it tough, finding it interesting, but sticking through it. What's interesting is when I first picked up Remake, I played a little bit of it and then I put it back down and didn't touch it for a while. Even though it was like my most anticipated game on GameCube and I got it as a birthday gift, I ultimately like went to Blockbuster and rented like Animal Crossing and Star Fox Adventures and had a lot more fun with those. And then once I got kind of settled with those, I came back to this one and went ahead and played through it. But ultimately wasn't that impressed by it, and that's kind of what I've been stuck with ever since. But when Zero came out, it was a lot more exciting, a lot more intriguing. It was something new and didn't do the things that this one did that I found to make it a little less fun, honestly. So give Zero a chance, definitely consider it, and definitely consider subscribing to this channel. If you guys have enjoyed hanging out, I'd really appreciate a subscription. We're on the road to 100 subscribers. It's really exciting. We've had a nice steady growth here, and it's really fun watching the community grow and seeing you guys in the comments. And speaking of that, man, let me know what you think about Resident Evil. I got a feeling most of you guys are going to say, man, screw this game. But I am really curious if there's anyone here who has some appreciation for it like I do. And I am curious where you would rank Resident Evil 0 overall in the series. I got a feeling a lot of people are going to rank it pretty low, maybe deservingly so, but I personally really love it and look forward to playing it again. Me and the wife have been playing through the entire series again, and Zero is one of the ones that I'm really looking forward to getting back to. Yeah, and if you could maybe give a like on the video if you enjoyed hanging out today, I'd really appreciate that. If you enjoyed the conversation, really helps bring the video to a lot of other people's attention so we can continue to have some fun engagement and grow this community here. But with all that being said, man, the next game that we're going to cover is Resident Evil Code Veronica. I'm really looking forward to discussing that one. It's been a minute since I played it, but I certainly got tons of memories with that game, and I'm really looking forward to sharing those with you guys. So check back with us again and go back and look at some of the other videos if you missed them. Resident Evil, man, it's a massive series. It's one of my favorites, probably still my absolute favorite. It's between Resident Evil and Ratchet and Clank, I think, is all-time favorite video game series. But with all that being said, I'll see you guys in the next one for Resident Evil Code Veronica.